What's up, Internet? Eric here. Thanks for checking out my new sketchbook series. In this first episode, I'm going to be creating this illustration. I'm also going to be talking about my thoughts on the imagination, creativity, and what it actually means to be an artist and what it means to be in touch with your creative imagination. So, let's get started.
That art's task is to save the soul of mankind, and that anything less is a dithering while Rome burns. If the artist cannot find the way, then the way cannot be found.
Some introductions are in order, since this is our first episode. I'm an illustrator, but since the pandemic began, I've kind of put all my professional commissions on hold, decided to refocus on the ideas that bring me joy and using my art for myself right now. I wanted to create my own sketchbook channel where I plan to create whatever I want and talk about the ideas that are interesting to me and hopefully have interesting conversations. Just know that this channel is not going to be primarily teaching art skills. This is just a place for me to draw and to think and to talk to you guys. My whole life, when I become obsessed with an idea, I draw it. I always have to draw to think. I think in images. I have a very overactive visual imagination, and I've always used drawing to help me understand the world better. I know that if I can't exactly put my ideas into words, I know that I can draw it out in my own symbolic language. So that's primarily what this channel is going to be about. I'm going to be thinking about ideas. I'm going to be drawing those ideas to help myself better understand, and I hope to have interesting conversations. Over the last couple of years, I have become extremely interested in topics like consciousness, spirituality, philosophy, psychology, and how all of those connect to art and the imagination. There are many interesting figures in these fields, and I will be covering a lot of them in the future of this channel. But to begin, I want to talk about a small group that I'm currently captivated with, a few small voices on a tiny little corner of the internet who have come together to talk about these kind of topics. Three people I want to talk about is John Vervaeke, Paul Vanderklay, and Jonathan Pageau. They're really interesting and motivational thinkers who come from very different backgrounds, but have all come together and converged around these topics of consciousness, spirituality, and this larger meaning crisis that all of Western culture is facing. John Vervaeke is a professor from the University of Toronto. He also has a YouTube channel here. Paul Vanderklay is a pastor from a small church called Living Stones. And Jonathan Pageau is an Orthodox Christian icon carver. All three of them all have their own YouTube channels. That's how I've gotten familiar with their work. Again, they all sound like very, very different people, but they have all come together, and all of them relate to these very interesting topics, and they all get together and have very interesting conversations. And their fascinating conversations really help me to understand these things from a different perspective and get a more complete and, in some sense, ancient understanding of these things. So, as I mentioned earlier, one of the major topics from this little corner of the internet is the meaning crisis. This is a term that John Vervaeke brought to our understanding with his amazing series, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. You can check it out here on YouTube. I'll put a link down in the description. I really recommend it for anyone who is really interested in taking a deep dive into these topics. It takes you on this really amazing journey about how our consciousness and what makes us human has evolved from the ancient minds that gave birth to the first works of art somewhere 40,000 years ago. And he traced that lineage down throughout the ages, down to the modern era and to our own cosmic dilemma that we find ourselves in. He calls this dilemma the meaning crisis, and he paints a very vivid picture of it. And his description and diagnosis was very impactful on me. Listening to John interact with Paul and Jonathan over the years has been extremely beneficial to my personal growth, and it's really helped me gain a good understanding of reality. And also, it's motivated me to get involved with a larger community and to start this channel and to try and integrate my love for art and creating art and somehow merge it with this evolving project of awakening myself from the meaning crisis. One of the big topics within this little corner of the internet, within the meaning crisis, is the feeling of meaninglessness that the material focused culture can produce in many of us. The materialistic worldview and the powers that science have given us are really marvelous things. No one can argue against that. I wouldn't be able to create this video without the marvelous superpowers that it gives us. It's really hard for anyone to argue that it's in any way limited or its basic axioms are mistaken in some way. But there really is one nagging mystery that science has been ignoring. It's not easy for science to test this because what science does is it tests ideas. A hypothesis is generated. Scientists think up ways to test that idea, and if they can eliminate it through their testing, they dismiss it, and if they can't, they keep it alive until it can be eliminated. That's the whole project of science, and then having more people verify your findings. But science can't ask the question, where do those ideas come from? That is a giant mystery in the center of the universe. It's the center of what makes us who we are too, because where do the ideas that come into our head that make us who we are, where do they come from? I don't think people really think about this question. I, for some reason, am obsessed with it. I know we call this thing the imagination. It's some creative force that some people have some control over. They're able to create new things. They're able to see things other people can't see. It's because they have this connection to their imagination like no one else. The ancient Greeks had a name for this force. They called it the Muse, and they personified this imaginative force in the figure of divine goddesses who would bless creative people with divine inspiration. It's where they said that these ideas came from. They saw it as a gift from the gods that these creative people would receive. And from the artist's perspective, I can tell you that it often feels like our creative ideas come from somewhere else. Often, the hardest thing about art is allowing your ego to get out of the way and allowing your unconscious, allowing the imagination to just come forth and show you what it wants to create. Sometimes those ideas that come to an artist, they can be immediately recognized as genius, and they can captivate right away, and they can throw the artist in a state of mania where they spend the next 10 hours obsessed with this creative idea. Or it can be like a tiny little seed, and it looks frail and weak, and the artist doesn't understand it, and they're just starting to play with it, and they just put it on the page, and they plant it, and they wait, and they sit on it, and they think about it, and then over time and over thoughtful examination and rumination, then the seed can blossom, and the idea can unfold and transmute, and then the next step emerges, and it grows and it blooms, and both examples are how ideas truly manifest themselves to the creative. I try to utilize my imagination as often as I can in my drawing practice. I have started a practice that I'm calling an active imagination illustration process that I have gathered from other sources on the internet that have done similar things. You actually find videos like this on YouTube. I'll link them below. When I begin a drawing, I want to put myself in a mindful state. I want to try and clear my mind from all thoughts, all desires, have no preconceived thought about what I want to put down on the page. I want to allow my hand to just start making marks on the page, to allow random scribbles anywhere that they feels right to land. Allow the pencil to just dance around the page, seemingly in a chaotic flow with no conscious thought behind it. And then when I'm ready, when it feels right, I will look at the page And sometimes immediately, sometimes it takes a few more moments of pushing around the pencil on the page, but an image will pop. It will come into existence. I will see something in this chaotic mess, and then my hand will just start to sculpt it. We'll start to see the form and start to put in the extra lines, start to push and pull, and the thing will start to emerge. And in my mind, as this is happening, it's like I am uncovering, it's like it's revealing, it's calling me forward, and it's revealing more and more. And as the drawing comes together, as the figure emerges out of this chaotic mess, it's it's always a surprise to me. It's always something I had no expectation of. And the more I play with it, the more I put into the drawing, the more that is revealed, the deeper it goes. And I'm always captivated. I'm always seeing more into this practice. Very fascinating for generating new and interesting illustrations, but it also is kind of therapeutic and allowing your unconscious to reveal itself to you in some way. And if you have a knowledge of symbolism, you might actually be able to get a deeper look at some of the forces that are driving you. So this active imagination technique is really the main idea in this illustration that I'm creating in this video. The illustration itself kind of embodies this technique. You can see that from the spilled ink on the book, it forms this pattern. You can see that the spilled ink on the book kind of shares a pattern with the image of a skull. And so once you kind of see the skull in the spilled ink, then the divine spark of inspiration can turn into a roaring flame, and you can fully see the image of Death himself emerging in your mind's eye. And that's kind of what I've tried to captivate in this illustration, that moment of inspiration when something unexpected has happened, a spill has emerged, and instead of panicking like we normally would, you see the pattern in the ink. You look for the symbolism that is right in front of you and allow the imagination to speak to you. And if you're able to see and be open to these kind of patterns, then all kinds of new things will be open to you. Your world will expand. Your mind will expand with the overwhelming amount of ideas that can flood into your brain and into your awareness. If you engage in a practice like this, to engage with your imagination more often, you'll be able to catch these little golden ideas that suddenly emerge seemingly out of the ether. And that's what this video is about. That's what this channel is going to be about. That's why I'm interested in consciousness and the imagination, and I wish to have conversations with people like John, Paul, and Jonathan, and the community that's grown around them, and the growing number of figures here on the internet that are also captivated by these topics. And if you have another thinker that I'm unaware of, please share them with me. Link me their video. I would love to learn more and to engage with more people who are interested in these kind of topics. I really appreciate you sticking with me for this first video, and I hope you check me out in the next one. Thank you.
If you want to be phoenixed, come and be park. Up nient, prospector, you sprout all your worth and you woof your wings. Is that perfectly clear?